What's going on, everyone? Welcome into another edition of the Patriots Beat podcast here on the CLNS Media Network, presented by our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. Brian Hines, joined as always with Alex Barth. And Barth, we just saw our 20th practice of the summer, our last practice of the summer. We've made it. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Unfortunately, it's another regular season mode practice, so we can't dive into the actual football on the field. But again, we will note the attendance ahead, just 24 hours out of roster cuts here. Pretty similar
24 hours from almost exactly
from when we're filming this right now. We'll be down to 53 players, but a big group missing again today, pretty similar to yesterday, but a lot of those guys were dealing with injuries throughout the past week. You have the Christian Gonzalez's, the Efton Chisholm, Kendrick Bournes, but again, no Marcus Epps, no Cole Strange, so some healthy guys look like they could be on their way out here, not being on the field the last 2 days.
Yeah, it's definitely a sign one way or the other, right? Something's up, and at this time of year, and we'll get into IR placements in a second, when players are hurt, sometimes we see a guy maybe get cut, and then it's all right, when you're healthy, keep up with your rehab. When you're healthy, we'll bring you back. Sometimes it's simply, hey, we need a certain minimum number of these guys for week one. Look at Marcus Epps at safety, right? That's a position where they're kind of thin, and does Marcus Epps help them if he's not going to be able to go week one? So definitely players to watch, again, as we head to that roster cut deadline on Thursday. Guys who aren't here. The one guy I just want to tag on that we talked about yesterday is Jack Gibbons. Was not out here again today. They were do you have the name? I actually don't have the name in front of me. They worked out a linebacker yesterday. So that's
who was from the Raiders, so they had some experience
right,
with him.
So that's kind of something that puts your antennas up, like, okay, linebacker out. They're already thin there. Linebacker works out. Now, maybe they're working him out because they know they're moving on from Gibbons. I feel like if it was somebody that immediate, they would have been here already because there was no new players on the field today. So as far as we know, as we're recording this, there's been no transaction made in this regard. This might be getting ahead of something in terms of the practice squad in a couple days. But linebacker not here, linebacker working out. That, to me, usually means injury.
Yep. It was Luke Masterson. He's played 37 games, 10 starts in the NFL, so some experience. Was a regular on the Raiders special teams units for 2 years there in 22 and 23. So potentially, if you do lose Jack Gibbons for a little bit of time there's another body, because that linebacker position, they're already pretty thin there. So some potential maybe reinforcements if Gibbons is going to miss some time there. But speaking of guys who miss times, we'll look ahead to roster cuts. Bart, they have 2 IR spots that they can put a guy on even before cutting down to 53 and then activate them at some point in the season. We mentioned a lot of those guys who have missed time this summer. So would you project, we're going to put you on the spot, any of those 2, who are they going to use those 2 IR spots on?
I still think it's going to be Bourne and Tavai. I still think those are the 2 guys because those are, of all the guys that have banged up, not including the guys that haven't been out here the last couple of days that we don't know what their situation is, right? Guys that we know are hurt. Those are the only 2 guys that are going to help you down the road. Like, I know some people have pointed out, it was reported Jalen Polk is having season-ending shoulder surgery, but they haven't put him on IR yet, officially. So some people have pointed out, is he maybe get one of those spots over Bourne? I would much rather have Kendrick Bourne. If things start getting thin at wide receiver or you just need another body or whatever, I'd much rather have Kendrick Bourne, who's been in this offense, who has more experience with this quarterback, who's, I think, a better player, right? I would much rather have him coming in to kind of, not save the day, but you get what I'm saying, like coming in kind of at the last minute than Jalen Polk, who was not out here much this summer, and when he was, really did not look good. So I don't know why they're waiting to IR Polk. Maybe they just cut him instead of carrying him on IR. Maybe the coaching staff's kind of looked at this and said, why keep him around? He doesn't have a future here. He's not going to win a job in camp next year. So maybe they move on from him. I don't know why they haven't IR'd him yet. He'd be the only other guy in the conversation to me. I don't know if I'm missing anybody, Brian. And then I guess we can get into Cole Strange and Marcus Epps. But to me, it's Tavai, and that's a thin position at linebacker where you may need help. And it's Bourne, where they obviously have more depth, but a guy that is a potential contributor.
Or maybe if Chisholm is in that wide receiver group too, and he's been dealing with something. If that injury, it doesn't seem like that injury is very serious. It doesn't seem that kind of serious.
Yeah,
like if they knew like Chisholm might miss more time than Bourne, they could use that for Chisholm. But it doesn't seem like Chisholm's is as serious as KB's right now.
No, it doesn't. And it's also that thing that we talked about yesterday. You really don't want, any young player, but wide receiver is probably higher on the list than some other positions. You miss a lot in those first 4 weeks. Even if he's not going to play a ton, the practice reps and the game planning and things that go into that. He could still be in the meetings, I guess, and that sort of thing. But you miss a lot when you're not on the practice field for what will end up being 6 weeks. including, he misses 2 weeks, and then the first 4 weeks, he misses 2 weeks of training camp in the first 4 weeks of the season. If I were them, I would be avoiding that as much as possible. Even if, the prognosis is 3 weeks, I'd rather he miss 3 than 4. I don't want him to miss 3, but I'd rather he miss 3 than 4. Bourne's a veteran. He honestly went through this last year.
Yeah.
So he kind of knows what comes with it. I at the wide receiver position, I just think Bourne makes the most sense.
And the experience in the system would be big. If you do need him, come off IR and jump right back into the offense.
Exactly.
So that would be big. Man, looking over at you right here is tough with the sun.
Is it?
Right,
Well, you
right
you
in
caught,
my eyes.
We were throwing
right
the
here.
ball around
This
before, and you had one coming
right in my eyes.
No, it was Taylor goes one hand with the sun in the eyes.
It's a tough sun,
so
but
I'll just say this: if you want to look over there and protect your eyes for a little bit, I can just kind of continue going on this. Cole Strange would be one variable here, because the more offensive line depth you have, the better. So I've said this, I don't think Cole Strange is on the team just based on what we've seen the last couple of weeks. I don't think they're getting him on the practice squad either. He will be on a 53 this year. So if you guy that was in the system this summer, has some experience with Drake May, can play multiple positions, if they feel like they may need him down the road, that might be how you stash him. We'll just have to see if that's ultimate they want. But again, Vrabel has been into the turnover of this roster. I know Kendrick Bourne was here, but he kind of straddles the fence given he's a McDaniels guy as well. He's been with the new coaching staff. Cole Strange would be a complete turnover guy.
Yep. Speaking of turning over this roster, I think both of us, we've gone through our 53 projections. We've gone over, cut or keep on the show even. A lot of times when we do it, we come out under 53, right?
Yeah.
In the mid-40s, high 40s. We've spoken about the depth issues on this football team. And Mike Vrabel's talked about these external additions that could happen, with trades, with the roster cuts, claiming guys on waivers. Do you have a number of how many you think they might settle on here, whether it's a late trade? It's not going to be Terry McLaurin as he signed this morning, but we'll talk about maybe another receiver they could trade for in a bit here. But do you have a number, maybe a sweet spot you're looking at, 3, 4, maybe more, maybe less, of guys that could be external additions here?
I think more than 3. I look at the positions so they could do it. Both tackle and guard on the offensive line. And I'm not saying they will do all of these, but realistically where they can make condition. Tackle and guard would make a lot of sense. They've brought in 2 linemen right around, in this week. Maybe it's not right at the deadline on waivers, but 2 years ago they trade for Tyrone Wheatley. They trade for Vidarian Lowe. Last year it was DeMontre Jacobs, Zach Thomas. Zach Thomas. I knew it was a former Cowboy. Zach Thomas they bring in. So the last 2 years they brought in multiple linemen on this day. So guard, tackle, whatever, both of those spots. Tight end / fullback, really. Jack Westover's looked like the starting fullback, and he's been fine, but he hasn't played fullback since his sophomore year of college. I want to say he's not a true fullback, but he's relatively inexperienced. If a true fullback gets cut elsewhere, do they bring a guy like that in? Or just a third tight end? They really don't have that guy right now. On defense, they could use another defensive tackle. They could use the depth there. We just talked about the thin, how thin they are at linebacker. They could use a spot there. And then a defensive back. Yeah. Either corner or safety. I think ideally if you're bringing somebody in, you bring in a hybrid who can do a little bit of both. But they could, I think there's an argument to keep a 6th corner. If they move on from Duggar, they're going to need another safety. Del Pettis is right on the fence if they feel like there's somebody better than Pettis out there that they can claim. So, how many positions did I just rattle off? 5, 6, 7?
Most of them.
Again, I don't think that they'll bring in an external addition at all of those spots. Some of them they might feel better about than we think. Some of those will be addressed by the practice squad, and then they'll address a couple. But there are, and you have to find better players too. It's not a guarantee. Like at defensive tackle, I don't know that you're going to find a better player than Jeremiah Farms. You might. I think you could. I don't know that you're going to find a better player than him. Do they ultimately want a 6th corner? Do they feel good about where DJ James is at? Or maybe there isn't a better player than Kobe Minor, Miles Battle, or whoever that 6th corner is. But those are spots where I'm watching where I think it would make sense. And then quarterback. I didn't even mention quarterback.
Bailey Zappi just got released.
Mike Vrabel hinted that there could be a 3rd quarterback. So I'm out on Zappi. I'm kind of out on Tommy DeVito. I don't know. I feel like I've seen enough from him. The guy I'm looking at, 53 or practice squad, if they're going to add a 3rd quarterback, we don't know whether he's going to get let go or not. I liked Max Brosmer in the draft. I loved what I saw from him in that preseason game.
I think
he
he's
looked good the other night.
I think he's QB2 in Minnesota now.
Over Carson Wentz?
Carson Wentz. Come on.
But is Carson Wentz going to sign to be a QB3?
Maybe.
So I don't. They might keep him as the 3rd quarterback. He's looked good.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, in terms of the quarterback thing, that's who I'm watching. I'm waiting for the tweet. Max Brosmer waived.
He was very impressive in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So if he gets waived, which I don't, they cut Sam Howell, so traded Sam Howell, so just going with JJ and Carson Wentz, that would be
I thought they had another guy. I might have been thinking of Howell.
Do they have Brett Rippon?
Maybe.
I think they have Brett Rippon. So
I call it a pipe dream. That's
so
who my
yeah.
eyes
If
on.
Max Brosmer was released in the quarterback room, I would definitely be interested in that. I'm with you with the offensive line. My guy from last year, Darian Kennard, in this conversation got traded last night, so that unfortunately will not happen. Are you with the elsewhere in the Eagles offensive line, the Kenyon Green? He got waived. He was in that Cole Strange draft class, another former first-round guard. Would you take a shot at him? I'm kind of in the, if Jess Stoutland couldn't figure him out there in Philly, he just might be cooked. But would you look at maybe another former first-round guard to bring in here as maybe a reclamation project?
By the way, the Vikings don't have another quarterback on the roster. I wouldn't entirely say no. I don't think he's a guy you're signing and plugging in as your starting left guard. Like you said, reclamation project. I'd absolutely sign him to the practice squad and see what's there. I liked him in the draft and all that, but I don't think he's a change of scenery guy, really. It's just you're bringing him in, hey, we put him in another offense, and I think he would be a good fit in this offense, but we're going to put him in another offense, put him in another building, and just see if kind of something clicks. Usually those are guys you're signing to the practice squad. Those aren't guys you're signing to the 53. So wouldn't be entirely opposed, but I don't know that I'd get all excited over it. Like, higher floor, solid depth guy, if we're talking about a 53-man spot, might do more for me than Kenyon Green.
I agree. But, all right, former draft picks. Let's run through a couple that are still left on the Patriots roster from the last few years. The 2024 class outside of Drake May doesn't look great, Barth. So very quickly, we talked about Jalen Polk, probably headed towards IR. Caden Wallace, last year's third-round pick. Do you have him on or off the roster as of right now?
Who was that? I was looking.
Caden Wallace.
I was trying to pull up the roster. Thank you. I can't make the excuse that the internet cut out. Caden Wallace, I think, is off. I'd like to see them keep him. I think what hurts him right now, and I know we said this was going to be rapid fire, we're looking at him as a hybrid.
It's never rapid fire.
It's never rapid fire. It's Patriots Beat. We may look at him as a hybrid guard tackle. Have we seen him take one tackle snap this summer?
Not this summer. No,
So,
I don't think so. In spring, he opened that tackle.
Yeah.
I think around minicamp, he made the switch, and he just never looked back.
If he had some tackle versatility, I think it'd maybe help him out. But if the coaching staff doesn't think he does, it's going to be an uphill climb. He's one of those guys who are like, there's really two initial rosters. There's the roster at 4 o'clock tomorrow, and then there's the week one roster, and things are going to change in between. To me, Caden Wallace is the guy you keep because he gives you some depth, but then when you find the guy on waivers, like you cut him, and maybe he's back on the practice squad. So I think he's here on the practice squad if he's not on the roster, but he could make the initial 53, but I think that's probably a spot they're going to look to fill off. I know I said they're not going to fill every position I listed in terms of the waiver claims.
Feels like there's definitely an offensive line.
I would be very surprised if there's not one offensive lineman here that wasn't here in the summer.
Yeah, I would love if they keep working with him. I think he's shown some
too.
flashes at guard. He is that thicker, more powerful guy. I think there could be something there. But he has been jumped. They draft Jared Wilson, who's playing left guard. Ben Brown has kind of jumped them and shown that guard versatility too. So definitely guys in front of him. But after Caden Wallace, Layden Robinson was waived yesterday with injury designation. Javon Baker was that next pick. Is Javon Baker going to make this team?
I think he's on the practice squad.
Okay.
I just don't think he showed quite enough at receiver. They have other guys who can play gunner. I think he plays games for this team this year. Maybe he ends up back on the roster at some point, but I just don't think he's on the initial 53 because you're worried about him getting claimed if he showed too much promise at receiver. The fact he's just a special teams player, I think you can get him to the practice squad.
I think he might make the initial 53, but not
the
on
week one
53 because...
Can I take that one step further?
Take it one step further.
On the initial 53, not on the week 153,
Practice
but he's the practice
elevation.
squad elevation.
Okay, there you go. There's Javon Baker's future. But no one else. Marcellus Dial on IR. Joe Milton gone. Jaheim Bell cut the other day. Jumping to the 2022 draft class, Barth. Cole Strange.
Real quick, can we go through 23? Because 23 is actually a decent draft.
Come back to
Oh, you're going to? All right, we can come back to 23. I want to talk about 23 very briefly.
Because there's only 2 guys left that are here, and maybe only one guy here because we haven't seen Cole Strange here the last 2 days. Do you think he's out of the building? Officially, is the Cole Strange era over there?
Yeah, we just talked about this. I think they'd love to have him on the practice squad. I think he'll get claimed, but it just hasn't looked. He's continued to get fewer reps as the summer has gone on. And then he had that rough final game in the preseason. I just think he's on the outside looking in.
I'm with you. And then, unless they bring Bailey Zappi or Andrew Stuber back, who got a shout out up on practice,
I did bring up
someone cut Andrew Stuber, maybe
Evan
some
knew
tackle
that
depth.
right away.
The only other
I would
member,
take Andrew Stuber back on the practice squad.
Why not at this point? The only other member on the 2022 draft class that is still here is Marcus Jones. We've talked about his role. He's on the team, but maybe that role, if they want some more size with Alex Austin. But Marcus Jones is on the team.
That might be a game plan thing.
Yeah.
Real quick, was anybody else here from 22 to start camp?
No. It was Jack Jones, Tyquan, Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris, Sam Roberts, Chasen Hines, Andrew Stuber. So no one else was even here. But the 2023 draft actually was not bad.
Could come through for him.
Christian Gonzalez will be on this team. Second and third rounds, Keon White, who that's another guy we've seen his role kind of decrease. Mike Vrabel talked about him this morning, that they're still going to need him in that rotation. So, I mean, Keon on the team, but what do you think about Vrabel's comments?
I just thought it was encouraging what Vrabel said. It's going to be a rotation, you mentioned 3, 4, 5 guys deep potentially. I still think he's going to have somewhat of a significant role. Maybe Chason's the top guy, but, we're talking about like a 45-40% split there in the snaps. One guy's at 45, one guy's at 40. I still don't believe, unless, we're talking about, and there was a report today that the Bengals are talking to Trey Hendrickson about his contract again. Those two are on and off. But unless it's like a Trey Hendrickson type trade, if you move on from Keon White, what do you have for established pass rushers? You have Harold Landry, who's like, Harold Landry's fine. Caleb Von Chason's had an unbelievable summer, don't get me wrong, but this is a guy that has a career-high 5 sacks in a season. And then you're down to Braden Swinson, Elijah Ponder. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Truman Jones. Like, that gets really thin really quick. I know there were some questions about Keon's roster status after that preseason game last week. I think if somebody blows him away, I think they would hear the offer. I don't think they're exactly itching to move on from Keon White.
And even valuable as backup depth on the interior, right? If something happens to Milton Williams, something happens to Christian Barmore, we've seen how good he is, working against guards. So that depth on the interior, I think, is valuable as well for keeping Keon White. But elsewhere in that 23 draft class, Marte Mapu seems like kind of carved himself out a role as a depth linebacker, especially with Jack Gibbons going around. So I have him on my team. Vrabel even mentioning his special teams contributions. I think Mapu is safe. And then going into day 3, Kayshon Boutte, Bryce Behringer, Demario Douglas are the 3. Those guys aren't going anywhere as well. So good draft class, that 2023.
And those guys are plugged. Again, we talked about the lack of depth on the edge they might have, the lack of depth at linebacker that Marte Mapu can maybe help out with. They're getting 2 key receivers. You see how one good draft can make a significant impact across the roster. I think just those 3 years in a row are a good illustration of what a good draft, how much a good draft can lift you, how much a bad draft can sink you. Because am I out of line and call 2023 good draft?
Oh, it's a great draft. It's like your first round pick. You want to sign him to another contract. Your day 2, at least one of those guys should be a starter. And then if you get like one contributor on day 3, that's usually how they define a good draft. And they have Boutte, Douglas, and Bryce on day 3.
Yeah.
Gonzalez is an all-pro. He should be in line for a huge contract extension. And then between Keon and Mapu, I mean, maybe not regular starters. We just said both of those guys are in rotations, but they're both here and contributors.
Keon White's going to be a contributing player. Keon White's going to be on the field when it matters.
Yeah. So I would definitely call that a good draft class there. But we'll see the futures with 22 and 24 outside of Drake May, not overly great. Last thing, Barth, to wrap this up, in the wide receiver room, we're doing trade talks again.
Here we go.
Jacoby Myers, old friend, requested a trade out there in Vegas. In the last year of his deal, he needs a new contract, so that's where this seems to stem from, that they can't negotiate and find a gap there to extend Jacoby Myers. So obviously lots of experience with Josh McDaniels, proven in this offense. Would you be interested in bringing Jacoby Myers back?
I mean, I'm in theory. I don't think this team should turn up the nose at good receivers. But what are you giving up? And where does he fit in, right? I'm not moving on from Stephon Diggs for him.
Yeah.
Which
that seems like the role, like there's overlap there in the role now.
So I'm not moving on from Stephon Diggs for him. I'm not moving on from Pop Douglas for him, which I think there's less overlap than people think, but I've seen that out there. If he wants to come here and be the 4th receiver, or you're going to rotate instead of one guy coming out of the rotation, Diggs is going to have to play, but maybe you take a little bit of snaps away from Boutte, a little bit of snaps away from Pop, a little bit of snaps away from Matt Collins, and it's just more of an outright rotation. Like, if you're doing that for a 6th-round pick, I wouldn't be opposed to it, because, again, this team just needs wide receiver talent. If you're talking about him being an upgrade over Diggs, I'll take Diggs' ceiling. I want the ceiling at this point. You can't move on from Pop. That would be, the offense would just be too slow. So I'm not going to say outright no, but he'd have to come here essentially and work into his role as time goes on. It wouldn't be him coming here and starting right away.
And it kind of feels like then you're really burying Kyle Williams. Right?
That's
because
a great point.
Mac Hollins and Keyshawn Boutte are kind of your outside guys. You know, we've seen Kyle Williams play some X this summer, but it feels like he'd be really good in that flanker role, you know, spelling Diggs, and you get more speed, athleticism, yards after the catch ability with Kyle Williams there. So with Diggs kind of manning that spot, and then Pop and Kyle Williams, the speed, the athleticism there, like I love Jacoby. He was great here, great in the locker room, but it just kind of feels redundant, and I don't know if I would necessarily move one of those guys out to bring him in either. If
he was going to come here and be like, I'll be like the fifth guy in the rotation.
He would join that group.
So here's the one caveat. Because this is really late in the process for a trade request, this, like, first time a wide receiver gets hurt this year. We're going to hear a lot about that name. And then I think it's not rooting for anybody to get hurt, but, like, if somebody goes down early, then it becomes a more real conversation to me. But right now, as weird as this sounds, talk about this Patriots team, they're okay at wide receiver. He's not a Terry McLaurin level player, right? So entering his age 29 season, I think you kind of ride with what you have. Guys have looked good in camp, and in a month, if Diggs doesn't look right off the knee, or Kyle Williams isn't making progress, or somebody gets hurt, then you reevaluate, because I can't imagine they're going to get a deal done in a week. But for now, I think you just monitor the situation. I'm not fully saying no. I'm not closing the book, but for now, I think they're probably in good shape.
And as we've seen with all these receivers, it just feels like the trade request is the step to get the contract. Maybe it's a little different with Jacoby.
That one feels a little different.
Because he is a little, older. They just drafted Jack Besh second round, right?
Yeah.
Who plays a similar style. And Vegas is just going to live in 12 personnel this year. So maybe they do move off from Jacoby, but monitor the situation, as you said. But I did lie. One last thing before we wrapped up. I think we said we were going to do like 8 to 10 minutes, and we're probably way over that. At this point, we're at 22 minutes.
So much for the quick podcast.
How about that for a
we
pod
we just sit down, we get comfortable.
How about pod? Okay, we'll wrap up very quickly. We can't do plugger of the day, but this was the last practice we watched in totality. So Barth, update the final plugger of the day.
So I will give you the guys who got multiple. I think there were like 30-something players. I'm not going to count. There were a lot of players that got at least one. Guys who got multiple, counting up, Keyshawn Boutte got 2. Efton Chisholm, Travion Henderson, Mac Hollins, and Pop Douglas got 3. Kaylavon Chason got 4. Robert Spillane got 5. And your plugger of the summer, we did not plan this going in. This just kind of happened. Drake May, 6th plugger of the day. So Drake May's your plugger of the summer.
For Drake
Well,
May.
I'll get you the list. We'll tweet out the full list.
So I would say that's a good thing, that your hopeful franchise quarterback is the leader in the plugger of the day.
Well, just to dig a little deeper, it's your franchise quarterback, and then the guys who got multiple. Spillane, new addition. Chason, new addition. Hollins, new addition. Henderson, new addition. Chisholm, new addition. The only guys they brought back who had multiple were Pop and Keyshawn Boutte, 2 receivers. So we saw in camp the impact of the new players.
There you go. So Drake May, winner of our inaugural Plugger of the Day award. So we will wrap up here before our camera cuts off. Make sure you guys are locked on to Patriots Press Pass. Like, subscribe, turn on those notifications so you do know when we go live. Tons of content coming, especially with roster cut down day tomorrow. So we will see you guys soon.